welcome to gaming and welcome back to my first review since my long hiatus, and I'm getting back into the swing of things by reviewing Spider-Man for PlayStation 4. Do you like what I did there? It's one of the most anticipated games of 2018 and it's exclusively for PlayStation 4. Sorry everybody else, you miss out on one of the best superhero games. Now it's very similar to the Arkham series in its combat and its cutscenes and the gadgets that you use. But that's not exactly a bad thing, is it? Because Arkham was one of the best superhero series we've ever seen. But you run the risk of being unoriginal by copying that formula. Where Spider-Man stands out is in its character, its lead character, Spider-Man. He's always been a fun and funny character, whether that be on page or on the screen or in pixelated format.
Writing your memoirs? Don't forget the hyphen between Spider and Man.
Get the chopper ready. I won't be long. I'm surprised you made it this far. But your foolishness ends now.
You do know I can still see you, right?
8 years of this insolence.
Oh, for me? You shouldn't have!
His bad jokes, gallows humour and his playful nature has always made him one of the standout superheroes. He even pokes fun at the more serious superheroes by role-playing as Spider-Cop.
Now I'm seeing an assault near you.
You're in luck, Yuri. Your favorite tough but lovable, grizzled, seen-too-much detective is in town.
What? No. You promised you wouldn't do that any...
Spider-Cop.
Please, no.
Insomniac Games have got the character absolutely bang on. They've even given us a Spider-Verse to love, as it's rich and vibrant. You can swing around New York City, taking photos of famous landmarks, as well as finding little Easter eggs from within the Marvel Universe. There's even a social media page, so yes, Spider-Man has Twitter. J. Jonah Jameson even has his own podcast that randomly plays throughout the game, keeping you up to date with his view on the events that you have caused. And of course he doesn't like Spider-Man, so it's a little bit of a biased approach. And it's pretty obvious what Insomniac Games are doing here, despite that character always being kind of an arsehole to Spider-Man. The way that they play him off here in this game, you wouldn't need a lot of info to know what kind of wars Insomniac Games could be starting here.
This is Just the Facts with J. Jonah Jameson, where listeners like you discuss the issues affecting our city with Pulitzer Prize-winning two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning former publisher of the Daily Bugle. Hey, plug the book! And as always, if you order Mr. Jameson's book, Spider-Man, Threat or Menace, within 24 hours of our broadcast, you'll get an autographed copy at no extra charge.
No personalizations, don't ask, not gonna get it.
Welcome to Just the Facts with J. Jonah Jameson, alerting you to the threats you don't even know about.
The world that we're thrown into here is 8 years into Spider-Man's career. It's 8 years since Uncle Ben died. That means we don't get an origin story, which is a similar thing that happened in the Marvel MCU film. We've seen the origin story enough times to know that we don't actually need to see it anymore. But throughout the game, you have the opportunity to do a little bit of lore exploring and a little bit of world building by finding items scattered throughout the city, mainly Peter's backpacks. For some reason he's been leaving them all over the city for the last 8 years, and this is kind of how you fill in the gaps if you're not totally up to date with things in the Spider-Verse. So as mentioned before, the combat is very similar to the Arkham series, but Spider-Man doesn't have the brute strength of some stronger characters in the universe. So of course he's got to use his wits and his gymnastic ability to get around these enemies. And as you play through the game, you can unlock new skills and gadgets that help during these sequences. The gadgets you unlock by doing these additional missions, things like clearing out the gang hideouts, doing research for Harry Osborn, and doing challenges from Taskmaster and Black Cat. Doing each one of these gives you a token that you can then use to upgrade your gadgets. You get to upgrade your skill points throughout the game by doing anything really, gaining XP as you go along. You level up, once you level up you get a skill point token to spend on your skill tree. You can also unlock new suits as you go along in the game, and some people might think, well, I just want to play in the classic blue and red and black Spider-Man outfit, and that's fine, but it does pay to unlock these different costumes, because once you unlock a costume you get its special ability. So Spider-Man can do these special abilities with the click of the two analog sticks in at once, and he does like this special move that can clear the whole board basically of any enemies. Each suit has its own special ability, and some of these are better for taking on a group of enemies. They'll clear everyone out, as I said, but some are better for things like stealth missions. So there's one that you can activate. You can go around just knocking people out, and if their friends spot them or if they see you doing it, they can't call in reinforcements whilst the special ability is active. Some of the other special abilities are better for taking on the bosses and the big boss battles. So it does pay to unlock the suits. I recommend that you do. One cool little feature actually within this is when you wear a new suit, of course, you know, you see Spider-Man wearing that during the game, so you'll have like a black suit on, maybe totally different to what you used to see in Spider-Man. During the cutscenes, those suits remain in the cutscene, which is cool. But then even one step further, during the loading screens, the suit is used in those loading screens as well. I thought that was a nice little attention to detail there. So one of the main points that people always bring up with Spider-Man is what would happen if there was nowhere for him to swing, if there was no high objects for him to do his web shots onto. And this was kind of explored in Spider-Man Homecoming. We see a scene where Spider-Man has nowhere to shoot his web, so he has to run. During this game, of course, we're in New York, so there's plenty of high buildings for him to swing from. But you can actually see where the webs are going in this game. It's not like he just does them straight up into the air and it's kind of like imaginary and you've got to use your imagination to picture him doing that. You can see him actually doing it onto the buildings as he's going along with the use of just holding down R2. But you can also click X to do like this double shot that pulls him along, makes you go a little bit faster as well. So I thought that was really cool just to be able to see it actually working, and it makes total sense. You also have this amazing music when you start swinging around, and it instantly reminded me of Homecoming and the Avengers. Now I don't know if the person that did the music on this game is involved in that, but it took inspiration obviously from those films because it just put me straight in the MCU with the musical cues. It makes you feel so heroic when you're swinging around and this music just comes on, blaring out. It's awesome.
I knew Fisk wouldn't go quietly.
Throughout the game there are quick time events, but they're used sparingly, and I think they were put in mainly to break up the long cutscenes. I know a lot of people were worried about these when we got the gameplay trailer, but as I say, they're only really mainly using the really long cutscenes, so it's not too bad. There's also these mini games that you do when Peter's trying to fix technology or scan for viruses and stuff like that, medical stuff. And these get a little bit annoying, I have to say. I felt that they were used a little bit too often during these segments. Maybe we didn't need to have these bits in. They could have just shown Peter figuring things out. But I'm nitpicking really. Again, it's not too annoying. It doesn't really distract too much from how amazing this game is. One thing that surprised me actually was that you don't always play as Spider-Man. Of course, there's segments where you are Peter Parker, that goes without saying. But there are segments where you play as Mary Jane or as Miles. Now, I didn't quite know who Miles was, and as I started playing the game and got a little bit further into it, I then realised who he's supposed to be. Obviously, more in-the-know Spider-Man fans will instantly know who that character is. But the sections with Mary Jane are mainly stealth sections, and that's for obvious reasons, I guess. Although I'm pretty sure she could kick ass if she wanted to. The same goes for Miles. But there are parts later on where Mary Jane gets to tell Spider-Man what to do. So she'll have to look around the environment and wait for things like the timing of enemies moving around and then order Spider-Man to go and do an action. I thought these were quite cool little segments and they broke the gameplay up nicely rather than it just being a beat 'em up all the way through. The boss battles in the game are never too difficult, but later on you do come up against two bosses at once, and I won't spoil who comes up against Spider-Man later on in these 2-on-1 battles, but they actually are very interesting because when you're taking on one of the bosses, it's pretty much standard dodge, counter, you know, standard kind of action game boss battle, I guess. But when it's the 2-on-1 bosses, you have to kind of get clever about what you're doing. You've got to use the environment, you can use the bosses against each other, which leads to some hilarious outcomes and leads to some even funnier dialogue. The later boss battles mix it up a little bit and they make you use your gadgets and sort of approach it in different ways to how you have been throughout the game. The game looks fantastic, during cutscenes especially, it looks amazing. The character models are just brilliant. I mean, we should expect this now, being so far into this generation of consoles. The day-night transitions just beg for you to use the photo mode. And that's another cool thing that's in the game, is a photo mode. So you can climb up the highest building you can find, and you can take a selfie of Spider-Man. And you can do all kinds of crazy filters, you can put stickers on there. It's a really nice little touch, you know, it's not essential, but it's something for people to mess about with, and people like that kind of thing. I did occasionally notice some texture popping, but that's to be expected in an open world game. It happens in them all, it's kind of inevitable, and it wasn't too noticeable, you know, it only happened a couple of times. It would have been amazing if they could have got loading screens out of this game, but it's a bit of a tall ask, I know, a tall order for them to do that. But just in the parts where Spider-Man goes into a building, changes to Peter Parker, it would have been nice to get rid of that loading screen there. It would have made it flow a little bit better. Loading screens out of big cutscenes or whatever, fine, but yeah, I'm being a little bit nitpicky here though with that. By the end of the game, all you want to do is play around in the combat because you've got it down so well, and because of the unlocking of all these different gadgets that play into the way Spider-Man can swing around and kick enemies in mid-air and do crazy things, you're just looking for fights by the end of the game. It's really cool. As mentioned earlier, there is loads to do in the game, and after the end game, don't worry about it. You've got so much you can go and do. All these extra little missions, and there are actually side missions as well, proper side missions. So the ones that I told you about earlier are research and clearing out gang hideouts and the sort of standard things that we come across in open world games. But there are actual side missions that have self-contained little stories, and they really make you feel like the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So with all that in the game, including a massive story that took me, I guess it took me maybe 20 to 30 hours to complete, I'm guessing. The game is so worth its price, just for the story alone, and then you've got all this extra stuff on top. It's a definite go out and buy right now if you're a PlayStation owner. Of course, there is a Stan Lee cameo. It wouldn't be a Marvel property without him being in there somehow, and it's quite early on in the game, so expect to see that. Without spoiling much of the game, I have to say that it gets very villain heavy towards the end. And this can be seen as a good thing or as a bad thing. I think they just about pull it off here. The only thing that I will say is that one of the main villains, his story arc is going so well and lovely, and you can see it being played out. And I actually thought it was leading towards a sequel. And then it sort of just happens at the end of the game. He just, all of a sudden, he's the big baddie. And I don't know, I feel like that was maybe a little bit rushed because it was going so nice. Maybe it's just because I expected that they were setting up for a sequel, and then all of a sudden he was in the game. Maybe that's why I felt that was rushed, but You have to play to find out what I'm talking about, and let me know if you agree or disagree. You'll know who I'm talking about. I was glad to see that more of the classic villains were thrown in, because the Martin Lee character, Mr. Negative, he's a relatively new character apparently. I think he came in maybe 10 years ago or something like that in the comics. I knew nothing about him. So it was nice to see some of the more classic villains in there. I was a little worried that they were going to go with this newer villain and leave more casual gamers or casual Spider-Man fans a little bit cold there with that. But fortunately, some of the more classic ones do appear later on in the game. You will have a blast swinging around New York City, beating up thugs and using the gadgets and the webs. It's just so much fun. Sony are killing it with their exclusives this year. We've had God of War, Detroit Become Human, and now Spider-Man. And we've got more to come. It's going to be really difficult to pick a game of the year at the end of this year, I think. But I'd like to award Spider-Man a 9 out of 10, making it equal to God of War and putting it right up there in contention. All I know is that it's really good to be a PlayStation owner right now. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and we'll see you in the next video.